Test.
How the mic levels. Yo, give me a beat.
No, I can't. Okay.
Okay, stop.
No, okay, that's not going to work.
Did you see the Edward Snowden interview last night?
I'm a spy.
I'm
James Bond.
It was really interesting.
I'm much cooler than you think I am. Yeah. And then
did you see the Frontline before that? Oh,
no.
Man. I love Frontline. It's such a good show.
Does it turn you on, all the ties and
stuff? I mean, it's not literally turning me on.
I just want to check.
It's just, I mean, intellectually, yes, Mitch, it is a turn on. I like being challenged by my viewpoints.
You are challenged.
I am. That's understatement of the year. It was just great. Yeah, I mean, it was just, you got it. The Frontline episode went to the whole NSA, secrecy, Google, Verizon sharing data, and then a little bit toward the end about Edward Snowden and kind of his motivation behind whistleblowing. But they also profiled a bunch of earlier whistleblowers at the NSA and what happened to them. And it was just, I mean...
Did we burn them? What did we do to them?
Yeah. They were...
Seriously?
Yeah, one of them was like way high up, an executive with the NSA. He started writing letters to legal counsel, didn't agree what was going on. Of course, he lost his job, forced to retire, spent all of this money, all of his savings, cashed out his 401ks on legal fees, got a job at the Apple store. It's the only job he could get. Right before it went to trial, NSA dropped all charges against him.
What?
And so he is all for naught.
Wow.
I mean, it was just, it was pretty crazy.
At least they didn't literally burn him.
Yeah, they did not literally burn him, no.
All right, so we got a lot happening today. A lot going on. We have our next greatest interview, the Dukes of Hazzard.
I'm excited
interview.
About this one. Yeah,
it's going to be famous. It's going to be like the Playboy interview. People are going to listen to us for the interviews.
Yes,
that's going to be great.
It's Jim Garrow.
Jim Garrow, who's a great public health voice.
I've been following him for a long time on Twitter and LinkedIn.
That's right.
Which I faithfully view.
Tumblr, Instagram. He's on every social media platform that exists. And here's the thing about him. I think he looks like Nathan Fillion from Firefly.
Oh,
the captain from Firefly.
Yeah.
On that other show he's on now that I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah.
But I'm really excited to have Nathan on.
If only we had Mechanism in front of us to look up information.
I know. If only there was a global network of information all over for us. But we're going to cover some other stuff, right?
Yeah. We're going to cover drones, of course.
Right.
We always got to talk about drones.
It's going to be hurricane season soon.
Hurricanes, drones. We're going to talk about 4 years since this major earthquake in China.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and IKEA, which is the global disaster relief force that is IKEA. And then coupled with my favorite subject this week, fire NATOs. The science behind them. And here's the thing about it. Here's my teaser. You want to know what it is?
Mm-hmm.
There's something in a fire even scarier than a fire NATO.
What is it?
I'm not going to tell you.
We have to wait.
All right, you're beatboxing. Yeah. I can't. You can't.
No,
what's fair about that?
I didn't write the rules. I just follow them.
You did write the rules.
All right, so let's get to the news rundown. First story. So Nature has published a report saying that they looked at the past 30 years of cyclones and hurricanes, and it's showing that cyclones and hurricanes are slowly moving north of the equator. So this is good news for the Caribbean islands and Florida, but not so good news for us.
Maine. Watch out, Maine.
And New York City and Portland and Washington, Seattle, I guess. So this is interesting. I mean, we have the past tropical storm responses that I worked weren't even hurricanes, and they were major impact to the city. So this is a little frightening, disconcerting, right?
I remember driving through a place, Tampa or the Florida Panhandle or something, after it got hit by like a high Category 3 or Category 4. And I mean, what that would do to parts of like the New Jersey coastline or upstate New York, not to mention the city, I mean, is it's like a thought I can't even fathom. Like, right. I feel like we should do modeling. We should get like Jerry Bruckheimer or something to like just model what that would be like,
right?
Just to prove to people the devastation.
You remember, was it 2005 that had like 5 hurricanes come through Florida?
2004.
Yeah. Can you imagine that happening in New York State, New Jersey? I mean, it's unbelievable. And like all those years of us making fun of Florida, being like, oh well, yeah, nice weather, but you got hurricanes. Now it's coming.
I was living in Florida when
That's
that
right,
was
and I made
happening.
fun of
That
you
was,
for years.
Yeah, damn it. But when I was in Florida at that time, we had Hurricane, right? We had this hurricane tracking system that we used. And one of the big advances that I've seen since then is the fact that now anybody has that. Like if you have an iPad or an iPhone, you have this intense hurricane tracking thing.
Right.
So I was looking at, my favorite one is this thing called the Hurricane Tracker app, which, by the way, guys, not an exciting name. So you may want to think about that, which is by these guys called Easy Apps. Again, not a great name, but it's a really useful app in that it shows you the Atlantic, the Pacific, outlook, and it has like storm tracking information from various models that you can compare, and it also lets you link to all the discussion boards, because there's always this intense, like every day, like today people are debating what hour the next tropical storm, which is going to be Boris, is going to form. Like that's the level of intense debate that's happening. So these things are tracked. They're like rock stars. It's like Miley Cyrus is traveling across the Caribbean.
We need to get these things trending on Twitter.
Oh yeah, that's sup Boris.
Yeah, that's right. I think also, like, I'm sure you've experienced this, a little bit of exercise fatigue for certain scenarios. And I feel like exercising, nobody really wants to do the hurricane anymore, just from having spent so much time on Sandy. But this kind of points to the need to, not forget about that. There's still a lot of ways we can get better at it.
The thing everybody wants to, this is my segue, you ready? The thing everybody wants to exercise now, cyber attacks. That's right. And I love this thing that you found from Slate, where there's an interview from the Wall Street Journal from FBI Director James Comey, who wants to hire a lot of white hat hackers but can't because they're high all the time.
Right.
And so his quote is, and I've felt this many times, "I have to hire a great workforce to compete with those cyber criminals, and some of those kids want to smoke weed on the way to the interview." And then he encourages somebody who's like a pothead to go ahead and apply, which is against federal policy, but if you need it, smoke it.
I feel like they need to kind of catch up to because I feel like I have friends who work in law enforcement who definitely have like smoked
names. I want names back, man.
And I feel like a lot of agencies have become less stringent on this. And like, let's be honest, like they're gonna legalize marijuana at some point, don't you think? I mean,
well, if it
may be 20 years.
Colorado Emergency Management, I wonder what their policy is now that they can go out and buy like hash brownies at the corner drugstore.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I've actually the Frontline, the NSA episode talked about Fort Meade, where NSA is. You've got all these military people in sharp uniforms and crew cuts walking around, and then you have these like pierced, tattooed up, long-haired, sweatshirt wearing guys running around, and like NSA has gone out and sought these hackers out to hire them. So I mean, that they're not really looking into past drug use.
Weed is like the least of their problems at that point, probably.
Right.
What's the guy from Breaking Bad?
Aaron Paul.
This is because I never watched Breaking Bad.
Bryan Cranston.
Yeah, he could be like the new hacker, the meth lab dude.
That's true. Yeah.
I don't think Bryan Cranston jokes are my forte. I'm really wrong. But here's the thing this highlighted for me is that Los Angeles has built this new cyber intrusion command center. There's a great piece in Emergency Management Magazine about it. The mayor, Eric Garcetti, put it together. They quoted IBM saying there's a 12% increase in cyber attacks 2013 versus 2012, up to 91 million cyber attacks.
Wow. Just on LA County?
No, that's a national number. Okay. For LA County, it was something like, it was still hundreds of thousands of attacks. I mean, it's like every day.
Wow.
But the thing that struck me is that they've spent millions of dollars putting together this cyber intrusion command center following the National Institute of Standards and Technology framework. They wrote this framework for countering intrusive cyber attacks. And New Jersey has one. That's a cyber fusion cell. They're popping up all over the place. So the worry that I have as an emergency manager is what you want as an emergency manager is you want one central EOC that everybody comes together to work the problem, right? And it can work any kind of problem. It could work hurricanes. It could work cyber attacks. And I'm worried that all of this money is going to go into the cyber attacks because they're like the new thing.
Yeah.
And it's going to weaken sort of the general emergency management capacities.
Right.
So, that's what I'm worried about.
And when's the last time we practiced running an EOC without power or just without computers.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been a long time, and like that would be tough.
Right. You got to do it on paper. You got to do repeater radio based systems.
Right.
You got to do ham radio operators. You basically got to exercise the end of that Terminator movie when the world gets destroyed.
Exactly.
That's what you really need to do.
You got to have runners
when the
on
computers
motorcycles.
Turn on you,
Yeah,
you need
exactly.
the bullhorns.
Yeah, it should though. I mean, we should totally practice. I mean, it's not an unrealistic thing to think about that happening. Us losing computers. All right. Third story.
Drone watch.
Nice.
That's right.
Got our drone.
Drone watch.
That's great. That really gets us.
Drone watch.
One more time.
Yeah,
One more time.
Keep playing
Yeah.
it. So I am a little obsessed with drones. Now that we've reported on it several weeks, I see them everywhere. Not literally, but virtually. I see that my Twitter feed is filled with drones.
Do other people see them too, or just you?
Yeah, exactly. They talk to me, Mitch. I hear them. No, but they're all over the news. The tornado chasers all have them. It's just like crazy. So, interesting enough, drone photography won an Academy Award this year, which I didn't know about. And this is an article from Bloomberg News. They're saying that it's tough though because in much of the U.S. it's illegal to fly these drones, and so. The Motion Picture Association of America has spent over, how much was it? $4 million since in 2012 and 13 on lobbying for drone technology. And it also quoted an Association for Unmanned Vehicle Systems International has spent over 1.2 million also on drones. And so it's crazy. They're coming, right? It's like, here's the other realization I had. Drones are just the new catchy term for model aircraft.
Yeah.
That's all they are, right?
With cameras,
But I feel like
and mics.
Yeah, but I mean, I just like we need to interview the single 45-year-old potbelly model aircraft enthusiast, guy who's suddenly the most popular guy in his neighborhood.
You know what? That actually reminds me. Back in the day, in the 40s and 50s and 60s, I remember that there were people that were model aircraft enthusiasts who would hook time-released cameras up to them, and they would fly them over disaster sites, and they would take pictures of remains of a fire, and that's what they did for intelligence. They did some of that in World War II, actually. They had similar mechanisms. So you're right, it isn't new. I think the thing about it is it's being democratized. Everybody can get them now. So I think it's less about government getting these things and more that you'll have volunteer drone owners all over the country who are going to be running footage of all these different events.
Right. And what's the rules about flying them over stadiums full of people or even through downtown areas or over
elementary schools
or elementary school? Even the National Park Service is saying, we don't want them in Yosemite. They've banned drones in Yosemite Park because they're buzzing climbers up mountains or scaring wildlife. So there needs to be rules, but how you go about doing that, that's tough.
Shoot them out of the sky. Shoot them on sight. Whenever you see a drone, take it down. Don't tell the drones I said that.
Oh, yeah. One more point on that. The police commissioner in New York City, Bill Bratton, has endorsed the use of drones. And he said it could be helpful in fighting crime, responding to disasters, fighting terrorism, which that last part,
I don't know what I see. About that. You know Knight Rider? I think there's
I know Knight Rider.
I just wanted to ask.
Jeez, who do you think I am?
There's going to be a new series that's still going to star David Hasselhoff, but his robot partner is going to be a drone, and it's going to talk to him, and they're going to have a buddy cop relationship. But he's going to send the drone out to track down criminals, and it's going to have little jet engines on the back.
I'd watch it.
No, that's going to be a great show.
Definitely. All right. So our next story is from the New York Times. And it's a very interesting article that's 4 years after a major earthquake in Yushu, China. This happened 4 years ago. It was a 7.1 magnitude earthquake. It killed 3,000 people and left over 100,000 people homeless. So the interesting thing about this story was that so many of their struggles are similar to what we go through here. So, the most of the article quotes this monk who says, despite the best intentions of the government, they often weren't sensitive to local concerns. They prioritized reconstruction tasks that maybe the locals didn't necessarily agree with. They were inundated with outside contractors that came in and profiteered kind of off the rebuilding effort. The Chinese government spent $7.2 billion on reconstructing efforts, but it still didn't finish. Like, there's still people homeless. These monks are living in a tent with nuns. Their monastery wasn't rebuilt. The last thing which I thought was very interesting, was that these monks were actually the first responders on the scenes. They were the ones pulling people out from the rubble. And one kind of positive note on this is that the monk was saying it's really pulled people together in this town. And they've, he says, having seen so much death, they realize everything they know of this earthly life will come to an end. So it makes them appreciate things more. But it's a pretty fascinating article here about, this Chinese community struggling with reconstruction.
And I do think in a future episode we should break that down, because I think one of the interesting things about that response is how different the mechanics of it are than a U.S. disaster response. So I think there is a lot to learn in both the monks' response as a local community and then the Chinese government response, which is really different than what we would have thought of.
Yeah.
The thing that struck me about it was reading that it reminded me of IKEA's refugee housing. Do you remember this story from last year?
Right, yeah.
So IKEA worked with the UN to develop this new type of, it's like flat pack housing. If you've ever been to IKEA, it's like a 200-pound box, and you open it up and you basically can build a house. They say in like 4 hours, that has solar panels, and it lets light in, but it has privacy at night too. And they built it all. And one of the debates in China was what kind of refugee housing that they should put together. And it's the same thing as part of the UN's going into Lebanon, which was hosting Syrian refugees. That was kind of the pilot test place for this IKEA housing. Lebanon had to agree to test out this IKEA refugee housing, which it refused to do for 6 months.
Wow.
Like, it left the refugees in tents because it didn't want to give the refugees better conditions and then they wouldn't go home. They would say, well, this IKEA house is nicer than what I've got at home, which is totally how I felt when I got my IKEA bookshelf. I'm going to stay with it forever. And the UN said, and I love this actually, that the great thing about these IKEA houses is that you can just take them with you. Like, they're portable enough that when you go home, if your home's destroyed, you can just take the IKEA house back with you.
That's amazing.
And then you've got this solar-powered electrical house wherever you are at home.
Wow.
Which I think is right. I mean, I don't think if you're a refugee, you're going to stay in a refugee camp just because you have a house, especially if you can take that house with you when you go.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a huge problem with disaster relief. That's why you have these massive refugee camps, in sub-Saharan Africa after wars and famine. Is people will come and the UN will come in, will feed them daily, and it kind of creates this dependence on the aid so that people don't then go back and repopulate the areas that they've been, even when that area isn't experiencing famine anymore, or the conflict has died down. So it seems to be a step in the right direction that they would be able to then take their house with you that has power.
My main problems with it are, one, it doesn't have a cool Swedish name.
It's not the Führig. The Führig von Bonbon.
The refugee. And two, the last thing I want as a refugee in an unknown situation is to have to put together frickin' IKEA furniture.
Can you? It's stressful enough in New York City in like in a very affluent community. Can you imagine doing that in a disaster zone? Oh man. So
it's once again time before we bring Jim on for our segment, new things to freak you out.
Oh my God!
Oh,
it's from Trolls 2. It's one of my favorite films.
I gotta admit, I didn't know there was a Trolls 2 or Trolls 1.
I don't know if there's a Trolls 3. I never really thought about that. Oh. So what I want to dig into a little bit here is the Firenado.
Dun, dun, dun.
I know, right? Everybody's talking about Firenados.
It is crazy.
I mean, they are, right? Mad props to Firenados. Eric Holthus in Slate wrote about the California drought. So just so everybody knows, California is now 100% at severe, extreme, or exceptional levels of drought. The entire state. There are fires around San Diego that have been burning. Some friends of mine were forced out of their house. They had to evacuate a few days ago. And so Slate dug into the science of Firenados. The LA Times dug into them. And essentially, Firenados are this thing where, fires get really hot. The heat rises. Did you know that? Sorry.
Wait, slow down. I'm not following you.
So When a fire happens,
It gets hot.
it does, right? And I've stuck my fingers in them enough time to know that. And hot air rises. You still with me? Okay, so the hot air rises.
Guess that makes sense.
And there's cooler air around it. And so then you get a vortex in the middle when there's an updraft. And so the vortex spins, and if there's flame there, you have
Right.
the spinning vortex.
Right.
So first of all, firenadoes are these brutal phenomenon, but like being me, right? What I did was I opened the Journal of Combustion, which is one of my favorite journals.
Are you kidding me? That
No.
thing actually exists?
Yeah, the
I
Journal
gotta
of Combustion.
subscribe.
So in 2011, they wrote this article about vortices and wildland fire, which is the technical term for firenado. You might be surprised that firenado is not the technical term for them. But they're actually called fire whirls or vertical vortices.
I can't believe fire whirl is the actual term and firenado is not accepted.
Yeah, it's true. Well, Twirly
Fire
Whirl
whirl.
was taken.
Twirly whirl.
Yeah, and Whirly Gig also. But so here's some sort of terrifying stats on firenadoes.
Okay, lay 'em on me.
All right, so 1871, Great Chicago Fire. Firenado that transported burning planks 600 meters ahead of the main fire.
What?
And that's what spread the fires. It would get a plank, it would toss it in the air 600 meters.
Oh my god.
In that same, you may not. One day we're going to do this on the show, but the same day as the Great Chicago Fire that everybody's heard of, there's
Yeah.
actually a worse fire in Wisconsin. It was
Oh,
like
wow.
4 times as big as the Great Chicago Fire.
Oh my gosh.
And it produced a whirlwind big enough to lift a house from its foundations.
No
So
way.
imagine your house rising up in a burning whirlwind of fire.
Wow.
So that's a remake of The Wizard of Oz to
Yeah.
do. And then in 1921, an earthquake hit Tokyo with a mass urban fire. So that there was a fire whirl there that was about 2 kilometers wide. And
What?
yeah. And this fire whirl killed 38,000 people in 15 minutes.
Oh,
Because
how
they had all
horrible.
gathered together in an area that didn't have fuel to
Right.
burn because they thought they were safe. But the fire whirl kept the fire inside the flame, and so it swept
And
over
just
the
kind
area.
Plus Tokyo, I mean, then it was like the paper city, right? There were all these dwellings made of.
And
Oh
then
my
in
gosh.
Hamburg, after the the Allies did strafing bombing, right, firebombing,
Right, the
over German
carpet
cities,
bombing,
right,
yeah.
and that created a fire whirl that was 3 kilometers in diameter and 5 kilometers tall.
Oh my gosh.
So the thing about it, though, is, and like so many things in emergency management, firenadoes are dramatic, right? They're great visuals. Everybody
Right.
wants to Tumblr them and Instagram them, and we'll talk to Jim about firenadoes. But the thing that actually scared me reading this Journal of Combustion article was the horizontal roll vortex, which doesn't have a
What the-
hashtag name, so we need to like think about that. But if the if the firenado is like a burning tower,
Yeah.
a horizontal roll vortex is like a
Like
it's
one
like
on
a-
its side.
it's like a burning Tootsie Roll kind of.
Yeah.
It's like a
Right.
pencil, right?
Yeah.
So what happens
That's just
is
coming toward you.
yeah, right,
a
exactly.
Demon of fire.
And it spins, so the vortex spins and it sort of moves towards you. And the thing about them is they tend to be slower. Like a firenado will move like 50 meters a second.
Yeah.
But a horizontal vortex moves like 3 meters a second. And so since the wind is spinning over the vortex, it's like a Ferris wheel, right?
Yeah.
It goes up, but then it shoots like down the other side. So whenever
Wow.
you see firefighters get trapped, it's often because there's been a horizontal roll vortex that's created because you can't tell it from the ground, right? Because the wind is in this whirl vortex, and when the fire goes up, you think it's just going up naturally, right? Because
Right.
fire goes up anyway.
Yeah.
You don't see this massive tornado thing, but then it comes down the other side because of the vortex, and so
Yeah.
you can get caught in it.
Oh my gosh.
So they're responsible for a lot of general wildland fire spread, which makes them responsible for many more deaths, a lot more destruction than the fire whirls.
Oh my god, man! God bless wildland firefighters. Those guys have a tough job.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
So that's a new nightmare. So
Yeah, new thing to worry about.
Hashtag firenado. Hashtag, what would we call these things? Fire laser? Fire skewer?
Fire log of
Fire
destruction.
logs. Okay.
That I think, yeah, and you wonder with the huge. I mean, Texas is the same way. There's this massive drought there.
Yeah.
I was talking to my parents. They live north of Dallas. The lakes, the huge reservoirs there are down 50%.
Yeah.
And it's just like it's happening all over. So I'm sure these wildfires are going to be really. It's early summer too.
So listener email. If anybody can think of a good name for a horizontal fire
yeah, that's a
neighbor,
good idea.
NATO,
Yeah, email us.
let us know.
Are you recording?
Yeah, I am. For reals. All right, so welcome back, and we are here with Jim Garrow, and I just have to say that Jim is one of my absolute favorite voices in emergency management communication. I already said this, actually, two things about you earlier in the show, Jim, which is one, that I think you look like Nathan Fillion from Firefly, which
That's good.
yeah, no, that's really good for you, right? And also that I think you're on every social media platform out there that exists in the world. And he has a blog called Face of the Matter. He is an employee for the Philadelphia Health Department, and he's told some great stories about social media, and I think has used it in really interesting and useful ways.
Yeah.
And so welcome, Jim.
Welcome.
Thank you so much, guys. Pleasure to be here.
It's great to meet you in person after following you for years on all these social media sites. This is a real treat for us. So, I got a question. Are you on Vine? Is Vine one of the social platforms?
I was on it for a little while, and then I found out that I'm not actually very creative, and stopped all that noise.
Yeah, I think pretty much everyone has gotten off of that.
What about Snapchat? Are you on Snapchat?
I mess around with it, but I don't have very many friends that do it. So it's like me and Taco Bell.
my daughter is on Snapchat.
That's one I haven't.
I really
tried
would. How
out
about
yet.
Ask FM? Are you on Ask FM, where anonymous
No,
people can
I'm not.
ask you questions?
No, I know that our condom program is, and I know that they've gotten one question in like the year and a half that they've been on there.
Oh, geez. I haven't even heard of that one.
No, really. Emma's my daughter, and she's on Ask FM, and people ask her questions like, Emma, do you like such and such, or like, Emma, but also painful questions like, Emma, do you think you're a loser? Or
What?
Emma, do you know that you're a rock star? It's like this like emotional roller coaster that you're on for
Oh
Ask
my
FM.
gosh.
All right.
Crazy.
But anyway, so at least there are some boundaries of social media frontiers that you haven't explored.
Yes.
Can you just tell us a little bit about your kind of personal journey of social media and tweeting specifically? Like, were you born a social media god, or did you achieve it? Was it thrust upon you?
No. It's a lot of smoke and mirrors, let me tell you. I actually am of the age where I missed most of social media growing up. I am one of the folks that doesn't have a history on Facebook. You can't go back and see all my college exploits online. I'm just old enough to have missed that. I like to joke that my younger sister is the first child of the internet, because she really was in high school when AOL and the AOL chat was taken off, and I missed all that. I was in college and I still had a pager. And so,
Were you a drug dealer?
no, I was not. Categorically, no. So I really missed all that, and so I didn't have any background in it. My rationale for getting on social media was my undergrad degree was in sociology, which is a great degree if you want to make absolutely no money and talk a lot of problems in big circles. So I just kind of bounced from job to job doing survey research design. And that went really well. It was interesting. I actually got to work at University of Pennsylvania for a while, which if you get the chance, do it, because it's a hoot. Everyone you meet there is the smartest person you've ever met. It's a blast. But everything there is grant funded, so when the grant ended, I was looking for a job. And a position opened up in the bioterrorism program at the health department, and I applied because there was a little bit of database design, because we were just building out our health alert network. And so I applied for it and was able to kind of lie my way into a communications position there.
That's the best way to do it. They're really impressed, actually, when you lie your way into those.
They can't do anything about it now, so I think it's okay to admit. But the shift into the field was so massive. It was completely different than anything I'd ever done. I had no background or history in either public health or in emergency management. So I wanted to learn as much as I could. I wanted to do as much reading online as I could. But I know my limitations, and I know that if I say I'm going to read everything that comes out on Homeland Security and emergency management and just kind of pinky swear promise that I'm going to do it, I'm not going to do it. So I started a blog, actually, and committed myself to posting at least once a week about something that I had read. I could just say that I read it and I agreed with it or I disagreed with it, or kind of go through the higher points of what the thing that I read was. And it was a way for me to kind of be public and just say, I'm committing to it's like when people do weight loss goals for New Year's resolution. You're supposed to tell somebody else that you're doing it so they can check in on you. Well, this was my check. And it was the funny thing about the blog actually was there was no rules in the city of Philadelphia at the time around social media use, and I was terrified because this was a first like real career job. So I did it under a pseudonym, and nobody knew who I was for 3.5 years. And it over time it got bigger and bigger, and I really gained an audience and started to make a name for myself, but it was this fake name that didn't exist and this person that wasn't real. And I have a little bit of an ego, so I squashed all that and restarted the blog as the face of the matter and came out as myself. And around the same time, I really started to get into Twitter a lot more as a way to drum up interest in the new blog and meet all these people that I've been essentially talking to for years, but I had no idea who I was.
Wow. So you kind of, your interest grew with the technology, it seems like. I mean, you actually have journeyed through all of the phases of the internet, like the anonymous, coaxing out phase, and then the sort of proudly yourself phase, and then the like expanded sort of messaging phase. It's awesome.
Oh, absolutely. It's, and as it's gone, I get such a rush out of the new technology as they come out, that it's now I'm that person. When some new thing comes out, I'm usually all over it, and I've got that account so I can save my name and test these things out, because I think it's number one, it's a rush to be able to be there on the forefront of what these new things are going. It gives me an opportunity to think big thoughts that are totally not fleshed out at all, but think strategically and 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road. But at the same time, then you kind of build that cachet as you're the person who tries everything. So when something new comes along, everybody turns to you, which is cool.
So how do you? Because this is really a podcast for practitioners. I mean, tell me something about how you feel that social media should be used, or maybe even more specifically, a story about how it was used in a response where you felt that it helped the cause of the response. What should we be doing with it as emergency managers?
Well, I think there's really two answers to that, Mitch, and they really relate to both of the questions. As everybody who works in emergencies knows, there's really two phases, and obviously there's more phases, but the Red Cross is divided up by, what do they call it now, gray skies and blue skies, something like that. The blue skies are in between the emergencies, for folks who don't know. So what do you do today when there's nothing going on? Well, you have your planning going on internally. But for anybody who works in communications, we understand that once the thing blows up, everybody has to know where to look and who to turn to listen to what you want to say. So if they don't know you exist, they won't turn to you. They'll turn to somebody else. So what do you do on those good days? What do you do on those in-between days, between emergencies, to get people to know who you are? And a lot of what emergency management does is they kind of write these messages that are, the way emergency managers write things. They're kind of dull, kind of boring, kind of worky.
What do you really? Thanks a
come
lot,
on.
Jim.
Take that back,
man.
Let's end
Why
this
did you
now.
invite this dude on the show?
This interview is over.
Oh my God.
I'm not in the field anymore, so.
No, you're totally right.
But it's not a knock against us. We live in our own little insular world that this is the way we talk. We're very jargony, and that's not the way the public works. You look at any social network now, and you see the way people talk on there. It's very conversational. It's very chatty. It's very personal. There's lots of storytelling. There's lots of personality, and we don't tend to do that so well just yet. So I think one of the things that practitioners really need to understand is on those in-between days, in between emergencies, it's okay to be yourself. To tell those stories, to have a joke. I all weekend long with this Kanye and Kardashian wedding, all I wanted to do was post tweets about how it related to public health and what we can learn from the Kanye Kim Kardashian wedding and how to be safe in bed. Because I think we're able to touch on these events that are going on that are real in people's lives and connect it to the work that we do. Now, maybe it doesn't always work all the time. That's why I'd never posted anything, because I could never really come up with something good. But we have to get out, I think, of that mindset of here are approved messages, and they don't offend anyone, and they're all nice and plain, and they hit the high points, and they've got the 27 words, and you can say them in 9 seconds or whatever it is. But they're boring, and nobody really cares what we say. So we have to find a way to be social and be conversational and be normal human beings for once.
Yeah.
And do that on the days in between the emergencies.
Right. Yeah.
And then when the emergency comes, that's when you can throw on your Superman cape and talk your jargon and, roll on your trucks that have flashing lights and have all your gear and equipment.
Yeah.
But on the in-between, we're very bad at that. We don't really know how to do in-between yet.
So, Jim, as you progressed and your mindset changed, like you said, and, as you adapted different technologies and different ways of using these technologies, how did the agencies you worked with progress too? Did you have to push them along? It sounds like, they're pretty progressive in Philly, and like I'm just wondering, what you saw or how you helped them also change and adapt.
And just because for most agencies that I've seen, right, there are like 7 levels of tweet approval, and by the time you get the tweet approved, Kanye and Kim got they got married like a month ago, right?
They're already divorced.
They're divorced. There's a little Kim Ye baby. Like the moment is gone.
Right.
Yeah. I fell into a very lucky situation, and I recommend this for anybody who works in public health and wants to get started on social media, is to have a pandemic.
Yeah. Okay.
Great.
And because it's in those situations, really all of your planning, you have plans and everybody knows how they work, but everybody kind of freaks that first 2 weeks, and it's very easy to push things through that you wouldn't normally be able to push through. So in my work perspective, that's essentially what happened. We had H1N1, and if you guys remember that first week, it was like on a Thursday that the news first hit, and then over the weekend things were insane, and when we got back to work on Monday, this was all we did, and we knew that this was going to be the next 2 months with H1N1. So it was, we were doing that. I started to put the idea of, let's start to get social media. This is how people are talking these days. And we, there was some initial discussion of we should do this, and we got approval to, okay, we think we can do this. But then by the time that all happened, it went away for the summer. But then, if you remember, in late August, the disease started coming back in the southern universities, and all the health departments started doing their planning efforts. And we had, I'll never forget this meeting as long as I live, because it was a blast. It was my division director in disease control, and all of our EPIs and our communicable disease folks and our immunizations people. And my division director basically went around the room and talked to the IMS folks and says, this is where you're going to give out the meds, and this is your CD folks, this is where this is what your case definition is going to be, and the EPI folks, this is what we're going to look for from the hospitals. And just as she's wrapping up, she says, is there anything else? And I raised my hand in the back of the room and very meekly said, can I do social media? And the room was completely silent. And she looked at me, and I love her. She's a brilliant woman, very smart. And she kind of leans forward and looks at me out of one eye and says, are you going to break anything? And I said, no, like as a question. And she said, okay, go ahead, you can get it set up. And we started a Facebook page and a Twitter account the next day, and it was exclusively flu focused. And that was the first time really the department got online in a social media context. We found it to be a huge smashing success. We really got a lot of good feedback from it, learned a ton of good lessons, and ever since then, as new programs come online or new efforts in the health department, there's almost an expectation that there'll be a social media component.
So what are the pitfalls? Because here's the thing, I never tweet. Like tweeting for some reason is weirdly it's like threatening to me. Like sometimes, occasionally I think, oh, this is a great tweet, but then like days will go by and I won't tweet anything because I can't think of anything good enough, or I'm worried that I will somehow get fired or that I will end up starting a nuclear war because it's like the butterfly effect and my tweet will cause like the fall of civilization. So what are, I guess, what are some actual honest to God failures that you've seen in social media, and what would make us sort of less scared of those?
The absolute, and my absolute favorite social media failure is a good friend of mine who actually just recently moved over to FEMA headquarters from the American Red Cross. Gloria Huang has a great Twitter account. She was one of their original, the Red Cross's original social media folks. She's an absolute rock star. She's great. And one day, a few years back, it was like a Friday afternoon, a 3:30, 4 o'clock kind of thing. She posted on the National American Red Cross Twitter feed, Ryan and I found a 4-pack of Dogfish Head. We're going to go out and get slizzard. And slizzard was misspelled, and it was hashtagged, and it was an absolute disaster. I mean, this is coming from the National Red Cross, and I want to say at the times they were having all kinds of problems with people questioning where their fundraising was going, and there was money problems. It was the wrong tweet at the wrong time.
Oh man.
And you can just imagine what the disaster looked like and how everybody freaked out.
Wow.
But what ended up happening is, I think they really practiced good social media, because the rest of the users on the account obviously followed the account and saw that this got posted, and very jokingly wrote, essentially posted on the account, we've taken the keys away from our fellow tweeter, and everybody's going to be safe tonight, and just kind of made light of the situation.
Yeah.
And it kind of blew up from there. Obviously, all of the Mashables and the tech crunches, and today it would probably be the Huffington Post folks, were all over it and showed what a disaster this was and what a horrible social media fail this was. And on Monday, the following Monday, Dogfish Head Beer posted about how excited they were that Red Cross liked their product. And they donated, several $1,000s and started a campaign, and Red Cross came out looking like $1 million from this because they made a mistake.
Whereas if they had issued like a formal apology or something like that, I mean, that I guess would have just made the whole thing worse.
Right.
Like, they would have treated it too seriously.
We regret this tweet, blah blah blah.
Right. Or like fired
or worse, even just deleted it and pretended like it never happened.
Oh yeah, okay.
That's a great point.
Because that was actually my first thought. But you can't do that. You're saying because somebody will have already seen it.
As soon as you post it, it lives forever on the internet. You can delete it, and nobody else will see the new one. But as we've seen, Anthony Weiner, I'm sure he was a great one where he posted things and tried to delete them. Well, they live on, and what we found is, and a lot of places have found this, as you have that disaster, own up to it. It was a mistake. It was an honest mistake. It's understandable, and I think the disconnect between a lot of folks who work in emergencies and the general public, and I'll point to you actually in this, Mitch, your tweets aren't that important.
Yeah, good.
I know.
Thank
that
you
helps.
so much,
It takes
Tim.
the
That's
pressure
really,
off.
I know, right?
You
No
know?
pressure.
Yeah.
Nobody's actually reading the tweets.
That's
so
right.
It's
Just-
fine.
And I think that's where the break is. When we in the professional side of things do messaging, we think of it as the almighty message. This is what we're saying, and it's the word of God, so to speak. Most other people out there use social media just as a conversation, and people misspeak all the time. And as long as you're honest about it and can make light of it, I think that really brings you off that high wire. Now, there are cases where you really can't joke it away. You can't make light of the situation. During the last presidential election, during one of the debates, the social media manager for KitchenAid, so they make the mixers, the $200 mixers.
Yeah, we have one of those.
Oh, I don't.
No, what you don't have? Oh no, we do. Sorry,
Interesting.
I made a little kitchen jealousy
consultant over here
there
doesn't have
happening. No, that's good. We're a very homemakey thing. We can't afford to eat out like you guys can. Sorry, Jim.
Sorry,
Go on.
we're digressing.
Yeah.
Posted just terrible things on the KitchenAid account, the official account. Horrible things about President Obama. And their director of communications, I want to say whoever the parent company for KitchenAid, essentially took over the account. They didn't close it. They left all the posts standing up, but reached out probably 2 or 3 dozen times that night on the KitchenAid account and on the corporate account, apologizing for it, reaching out to people who complained about it. Not just media members, but actual regular people who wrote in and said this is disgusting, and really did damage control. And I feel terrible for the woman who was the director of communications that night, because I'm sure she got no sleep at all. But now I'll ask you, did you ever hear that story?
No.
No.
No,
I
and we
haven't.
own a KitchenAid, and I didn't even hear about it.
Right.
Yeah.
it's you can do these things. Social media tends to be a conversation, and as long as you're open and honest, and if you have something you can make light of it, and bring people in, and people have a good time with it. And if you can't, then you do your regular damage control, and these things tend to go away quickly. So I would caution people to, when you post something, yes, it lives forever, but the media cycle spins on, and they will move past you, and your tweet will not cause Armageddon.
What about this other thing? We've been looking at social media monitoring, and there's this thing now where people are tweeting for help, right? Or people will, online help services, people will tweet in their questions instead of doing it by email or other things like that. And the worry is, that in a disaster you'll have millions of those at once, and you can't possibly process or triage all those things. But I've seen emergency management groups who are starting to do it. They're starting to say, tweet us and we'll respond. And I'm worried that they won't understand the level of response they might get, the peaks that'll happen in emergencies. What do you think about that trend?
It's really interesting, because my best story from that actually comes from New York and Hurricane Sandy. The work that Emily Rahimi did, where they essentially used Twitter to assist with dispatch. It was phenomenal, and anybody who hasn't heard that story, I encourage it, because they really went across. The FDNY really went against what their stated social media policy was of not responding to emergency complaints on social media. But because the situation was so dire, was so extreme, they went around that and actually made and were able to dispatch via social media. Now, the thing that I would complain about is, yes, I don't think anybody understands what the burden of that would look like. In the middle of a real emergency, what would the social media crush look like? And I don't think anybody can fathom that. It will be the worst you can think of times 10. But at the same time, 911 services do the same thing. When something big happens, how many calls come into 911? How many times do people have to sit on hold or wait for things to cycle through? You only have so many 911 operators on at the time, and they've got to go through their standard script. With social media messages, I would argue you can take that data, and with a real data scientist or someone who can look at that data, plot it geographically, you can get an idea of where hotspots are. You won't be able to respond to specific complaints, but it's a great information gathering tool. Yeah. And if you're not getting 10,000 of them at once, it gives you that opportunity to do that one-on-one triage. Sure, you're not going to hit everybody, but you get the opportunity to help folks who normally wouldn't be able to do it. Mm-hmm. And I think you're going to see more and more of it, even as every emergency management and every police and fire department has that on their social media site saying, we don't check this all the time. If you have an emergency, call 911. People still post on there. 2 years ago, the Red Cross did a survey on social media where some ridiculous number of percentage of people surveyed, 75% or 60% of people said they would send a message to a response agency via social media, and would expect not only the agency to see the message, but respond in under an hour. This is an expectation that people already have, and it's only going to get worse. So we can either try to work that into our process and understand that it's not always going to go perfectly, and we're going to miss people, and it's going to take a while, and it's going to take people and money. But we have to understand that expectation already exists. People are already doing it. We're just ignoring it now.
So where do you see social media going in the future? And maybe we'll just limit this to the three big guys: Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Let's say, do you think they will become as common as email, as integrated into society as email, or do you see them fading away and being replaced by some other mechanism?
Oh, absolutely. No, yes. I mean, certainly buy Facebook shares if you can, but don't plan on giving them to your grandkids.
Can you afford those, consultant? Can you afford Facebook shares?
No, I cannot.
All right. I think we get very tied to this idea that a technology is a medium. Email is a great example. Email is not a company. Yeah. Email is not a social network. Email is sort of like a copper wire that phone calls go through, or it's the postal service. Whereas these things are companies, and they're tied to specific company goals. And I think what you'll see is, as people's tastes change, the social networks that they use will change. So I mean, everybody can understands the idea of MySpace and how that faded away. But you'll see it even on smaller scales. Flickr is actually a really nice social network that was growing wildly until they were bought by Yahoo, and really kind of missed the boat on photo sharing.
Yeah.
And you could say it's due to management's decisions, but at the same time, they were a social network that didn't change with the taste of the public. And that's where you see the rise of groups like Instagram and those other photo sharing services that have a much lower bar of entry. So now everybody's on Instagram, and how many people do you know have active accounts on Flickr that still use and share and use that as a social network?
I'm still on Friendster, actually.
On Friendster?
Yeah, I love
Oh
Friendster.
my gosh.
Yeah. I joined that in. When did it come out?
Yeah.
2001. Yeah, I love it. I'm on. There are like 3 of us. It's great.
Wow. That's great.
But I think what you'll see, and I think if you look at it, that 10,000-foot view, you can already start to see it. There's been such a backlash from of people for things like Facebook is a great example. Everybody's worried about their privacy on Facebook, and you see all kinds of articles about how to protect your account and how to make sure people aren't stalking you on Facebook and make sure you're not sharing the wrong things with the wrong people. So what you've seen is, at the very startup level, a huge host of apps that are completely anonymous. And a lot of this, I would argue, is in response to people's taste changing. It's no longer let's everybody get on Facebook and share everything we do, because now those users are getting older, they're getting more savvy. They realize that, I don't want to post my party pics in the same place that I talk to my boss.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I've read stories that the younger generation are getting off of Facebook and they're moving to these Snapchat type. It's not sharing everything they did today, but it's very specific and focused.
And I do think there's a place for anonymity in emergency communications. Like during a disaster, we were talking about Ask FM. I mean, there are places for anonymous questions to come in and process. So I do think that it makes sense to have a presence in that kind of an environment. Although I know that's dangerous and it leads to a lot of trolling and that kind of stuff. That's why Friendster was so great. It covered all the bases.
All right, give it up.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that in an emergency perspective. There's one app that's out now, and I think it's just mobile based, called Yik Yak. And what it is, it's basically a bulletin board that's not tied to anyone's name. And you don't have an account. You just log in and essentially start typing, and it shows you all of the messages that are posted in your immediate area. And you can upvote the post or downvote the posts. And literally, that's all there is to it. It's not a social network in any way, shape, or form. It's really just people shouting into the ether, and this collecting all of those shouts and putting them all in one place. And it's huge, apparently, on some college campuses as a way to organize parties and find out where friends are. But they've seen instances of high schoolers essentially getting on this app and calling in bomb threats. And it's gotten such bad press that the company actually had to go through and geo-fence high schools out of the app. So if you're in one of these high schools, you can't get on the app, or you don't see any messages on there because it became such a problem with these fake bomb threats.
No way. Wow.
I think part of the thing that's fascinating about this is I feel like something like I'm watching the development of a pencil in the year 900. We're in just the infancy of this stuff, and there are all of these silos, and I feel like one day it will become this sort of mesh network of social connections that will all be talking to each one, and it will be really like an ecological kind of ecosystem, and we're watching that develop and sort of stumbling along the way, but it's a fascinating process.
Absolutely. I've argued at the beginning of doing a lot of the social media stuff that what we're seeing right now is absolutely no different than the Gutenberg press. We're seeing the absolute revolution of how the world communicates, and nothing will ever be the same again. So to live in this time is just such a fun, interesting, exciting time.
So in honor of Steve Gutenberg, we are going to play an official Dukes of Hazzards game with you, Jim. So this game is called Good Tweet, Bad Tweet. And what we're going to do is we're going to read off a series of tweets. Hazard County has been unfortunately hit by a firenado. And so we're going to read you some tweets about the firenado, and you tell us what's good and sort of what's bad about them. You know?
Yeah, how they could be improved
Yeah, exactly.
if they're not already perfect.
No, but
that
they
is.
probably, I think, will be perfect
Yeah.
because we wrote them in like
Exactly.
5 minutes before we started the show.
Right.
You want to go first?
Yeah. Okay.
All
So
right, all right.
here's the first tweet. So, the scenario is this Firenado is coming into Hazard County. So here's the tweet from Hazard County OEM. There's a 3-kilometer Firenado coming toward Main Street. That's the tweet.
That's the whole tweet.
That's the whole tweet.
That's the whole tweet.
Isn't that awesome?
That's a good start. Let's put it that way.
Oh, all right. Good
Okay,
start.
good. Yeah. Uh-huh.
It's Twitter is a unique animal because you've only got that 140 characters, and how do you fit so much in there? And Firenado is what? That's got 8 or 9 characters, right?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
It's tough to do. My biggest problem is actually just because there's only one of them, and it just kind of sticks out there. If one day Hazard County OEM just posted that, my first question would be like, well, I would want a picture because it's a 3-kilometer fire.
Sure, I think that's fair.
Yeah. That's.
But it doesn't tell you what to do. Okay, do I leave? Do I stay? Is this an opportunity for me to come and take a picture? You have a great opportunity, especially if this is the first instance of it happening. And if you talk to your media professionals, they'll tell you to set the conversation. This is your chance to define what this is. What do you want me to do with it?
Oh, okay.
That's
So
a great point.
here's the second. This is a great segue into our second tweet. So that tweet was at 10 a.m. Here's our 11 a.m. Hazard County tweet. All right, and the tweet is: if you're on fire, stop, drop, and roll.
But I would like to
Very
add
good.
it's an hour after the first
Oh,
tweet.
yeah, if the Firenado is still going after an hour, and I don't know much about how they work. I'm guessing Hazard County, most of it will be on fire by this point.
I think so.
But I mean, but it's, to me, that's clear. It's concise. It gives simple instructions. What's wrong with that one?
They're probably not reading Twitter, right? If they're on fire.
Maybe a better tweet would be, if you see someone on fire, knock them over.
That's awesome.
Oh, no,
that's actually really good.
That's really good. We should have thought of that. Okay, no, that's fair.
It's good. You mentioned the time frame. I think that's probably the biggest failure of this message, is that in the event of a Firenado, and I say this just from personal experience, if I saw a Firenado, I can probably fire off about 10 or 15 tweets in about 2 minutes. Now, granted, I'm pretty quick, and I know that, but that message would be absolutely lost. Because the thing about Twitter is, and there's been studies about this, the average tweet only has a lifespan of a couple minutes, 2 to 3 minutes at most. So after that time, you don't exist anymore. That message is gone.
So we have like slow trigger finger, slow twigger. Could
Yeah.
we call it? Our twigger is slow.
It is. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So here's our next one, and that is, which is an hour later, but let's just assume it's like 5 minutes later.
Okay.
We did it really faster than we. And so and the tweet is: people with burns should go to the Hazard County Hospital. Other folks should stay away to avoid crowding the hospital.
That's not a bad tweet, actually. Does it fit 140 characters?
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. Did you take all the vowels out? No, I mean, that's good. It's because I think it gives you an opportunity to address really all of those onlookers, and that's something that we in emergency management, and I say we, pejoratively, we don't do it well, because we are so focused on the emergency that we forget that the rest of the world is looking in on our emergency. Big Firenados don't just happen in Hazards County. That would be on the front page of CNN, and that would be all over Huffington Post. And you'd have, Ezra Klein doing a post on how Firenados are good for the economy. And this isn't just your emergency anymore. And I think I really actually like that tweet, because I think it addresses those bystanders that we don't ever talk about.
Dude, we are awesome.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so here's another one. This is an hour later. There was a Firenado. No new information to give at this time. Thank you, good citizens.
That's not a bad one.
Whoa.
Oh, really?
I
I'm
would
surprised by that.
say that's one to keep. because it is an hour later, and that's really an update for that's a great tweet for the media. Just because if you have the media calling you, all the time, they see that and see that there's nothing new to report. What I would make sure to bookend that tweet with, though, is other messages about essentially, and to say the word hot is kind of silly, but to strike while the iron's hot this is your perfect example. If you have messages around preparedness and the fire NATO is out and all the burn victims are being taken care of and people are putting their lives back together, this is a great opportunity to talk about rebuilding with resilience in mind. This is a great opportunity to talk about how to be prepared for the next fire NATO. How to, and even to work with other agencies to see to push their messages out. A great example of what we did during Hurricane Sandy, to take away from the game a little bit. Hurricane Sandy hit in Jersey and went up through New York, but we still got it here down in Philly, and it was we got some flooding. But what we actually ended up doing was, as the storm was coming through, our health department only retweeted EMA and police and fire tweets. We didn't post anything original as the storm was coming through. Now, after the storm went through, after a hurricane is really a public health emergency. You have floods, you have people who are injured, you have power outages, you have things like that. It's very much in public health's alley. And that's when we posted all of our messaging. And what we found was those other agencies that we helped during the height of the storm, when they were the primary responders, helped us out. They responded in kind. They retweeted all of our stuff. And in the course of like 6 or 7 hours, our tiny little Twitter account reached nearly 1 million impressions, just because it wasn't just us. It was those other agencies that were tangentially involved in our response. So I think that that's a great opportunity. Like I said, that tweet is good, but it's only so good by the things that are around it. So I think that's your opportunity to thank your partners, to point people to other resources, to get them ready for the next one.
I think we sort of, and this is our last one, but I think we sort of seized the opportunity with our last tweet here, which was, okay, here's our Hazard County tweet, 3 p.m., which was LOL, OMG, have you seen DeNATO up in here, hashtag Fire NATO, hashtag burning. Is it, I mean, you said personal, right? You said, informal communication.
Yeah, speak the language of the people.
I feel like that really meets that goal.
Now, what you really need when the media asks the fire chief is you have to make sure your fire chief has that big walrus mustache and he's like 400 pounds and he's got to read it on the mic.
That would be awesome.
But seriously, what do you do with that language? Like I can't understand a quarter of the tweets that go by. You know what I mean? Do you use that language? Do you adopt what do you do with the OMGs of the world?
No, we, and I don't recommend that you do that from an agency perspective. I think that, sorry, it's as funny, unless you want to do it and then say, sorry, my kid got a hold of my phone. I think there is a certain level of professionalism that we have to maintain. We are still the experts. But I think that there's space in between our jargon-filled, stilted white coat language and OMG WTF.
Yeah.
Good. Awesome. Well,
that's great.
Dude, Jim, thank you so much. I mean, that was like an enlightening but funny kind of session there.
Yeah, that was awesome.
I'm totally kissing your ass now. You talk.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to learn, and I mean, I think that be specific, be timely. Be relevant, and there's a lot there.
I actually really like the idea of supporting your partners, retweeting their stuff, then them retweeting your stuff, and trying everybody upping everybody else's message to make sure you sort of permeate all of the ether that's
right. Think of yourself as a peg in the overall response, and to work collaboratively with the other agencies to get the common message out.
Yeah.
Right.
That's great.
Any last thoughts you want to leave us with, Jim?
I love that we were able to talk about social media. I think it's such an important thing. And honestly, guys, I had such a good time. I'd do this 2 or 3 more times in a row and continue to talk social media. I'd love in the future if you guys could talk about mobile. Because I think I think that as much as I say social media is going to change what we're doing, mobile is doubling down on that change. because I know that I can do my entire job from my phone right now, and it's only going to get pushed more and more in that direction. And I'd love to be able to see, how emergency management agencies and how emergency responders are not only integrating mobile into their operations, but really how they're dealing with a public that's increasingly mobile.
Yeah.
Because I think it's a huge gap that so many people just don't get. So many of our responders are tied to their BlackBerries, and the kids these days look at BlackBerries like they're dinosaurs. So I think there's a real disconnect there, and as much as we may get social media and we're slowly learning the lessons, I think mobile is a huge gap that we don't know enough about. And I think you guys could do a real service to the industry to dig into that a little bit.
We're on that.
Yeah, that would be actually a fascinating show.
Yeah.
We'll have you back on and we can.
Yeah, Andrew's obsessed with drones, so maybe I'll become obsessed with mobile.
Yeah,
and then, my mobile technology can fight your drones.
Absolutely.
And that would be the sequel to Pacific Rim. So
Perfect.
thank you again so much, Jim. And everybody stand by for the credits.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks so much, guys.
Oh, are we ending the show?
No, we got to do the credits now.
Okay, yeah.
We're still recording. Jim's going to just stand by awkwardly while we record.
Awkwardly listening to
Yeah,
our closing. All right, so email us at hazardspodcasts@gmail.com. Be sure and check out our website at hazardspodcast.com. Review us on iTunes. Thank you for listening. Send us questions, suggestions for the show. Do you have an emergency management question? Send it to us.
Or tweet us.
Yeah,
you should totally
there you go.
tweet us.
Yeah.
We're going to commit to sending out. I'm going to send, me
Help
personally.
Mitch tweet
I'm going to
better.
send out seven meaningless tweets about this show.
Before the next show.
Before the next
7
show.
tweets.
That's
All
right. It's going to be amazing.
Lock it down.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Jim. You're the best.
Hey, that was a blast, guys. I meant every word of that I would do this 2 or 3 more times because it was a hoot.
That's awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely. Yeah.
We're
You
talking.
still recording.
Yeah, I can't help it. It's still the outro. Later, y'all.